Hello and welcome to DNA. I'm Chitresh and we have today with us an economist, Vatsalya Srivastav, and we're talking about the economic factors that may have contributed to the mandate in 2024, the reduced mandate for BJP Prime Minister Modi-led government. So the topic for this discussion is pension. So pension is something that is for a country like India, which relies and still wants government jobs over private jobs. Pension is a big issue, a big factor. And with the recent push towards privatization, this has been an issue of concern for several parts of the country, many people. So what do you think about it? Has pension played some role in deciding how the people have voted this time?
I would, and again, some people would point out that pensions are only a relevant conversation for a very small percentage of people. But remember what we talked about in terms of if you're a country that is economically on the move, a lot of questions are a question of aspiration. Where is it that I want to be? So I may not be somebody who is today in a position for whom say pension is relevant or not, because I might not have worked in, say, the public sector entity. But I am thinking about that would be a good outcome. If I get there, this service should not disappear. So if you recall, and again, this is one of the conversations that was very relevant in the last round of assembly elections, when you had states like Rajasthan and so on, where elections were happening, and where Rajasthan very explicitly went back on the new pension scheme, and they went back to the old pension scheme. And back then, this was a very important conversation. But for some reason, again, when we come to the conversation around this Lok Sabha election, this is not something that a lot of analysts have been talking about. Now, my own sense would be, at least the way that I look at it, is that pension is a thorny issue, both from the point of view of fiscal prudence, because we already see a lot of very rich countries getting to a point where their pension systems are becoming unsustainable. We, at a very, very early stage in our development process, decided that pensions, or at least guaranteed defined benefits pensions, are something that we want to pull back from a large proportion of...
when did this happen, if you could give a perspective to the viewers?
So, this has slowly been happening for a long time. There are some parts of the government where it is maintained. So, for instance, if you're looking at the public sector banks, that is a place where your pensions are still retained. But in a lot of other PSUs, it has disappeared. Particularly for a lot of state PSUs, which already have a very weak fiscal position. So the process starts in the late 90s and then it spreads and so on, and the government comes out with a new pension scheme. I believe that this is again one of those conversations that has been missed, because we started looking at areas in which political parties wanted to highlight their differences, as opposed to areas in which there is general agreement among policymakers that see defined benefit pensions or the old pension scheme is not sustainable. There seems to be general agreement at the level of political parties, policymakers, the bureaucratic apparatus. But of course, it is something that is very, very material to people. And remember, there is a generation that is leaving the government service today, which does not have pension. They joined government services when they thought that this was the only game in town. So they joined in the early 80s, mid 80s. And at the time of retirement, they're seeing a world that has transformed completely. Very early career people today are making a lot of money. So if I am a person who started out in the 80s, and today I see a world in which I have spent my lifetime working on a pittance, and now the very bare minimum, the whole point of a government job is that it is stable, that I'll be well taken care of. So I never got the riches that these young people are getting in the private sector. Can I at least be taken care of? And I don't think that this is an issue that gets limited to the people for whom it is directly relevant, whether I get the pension or not. I think it spreads because this is a view of how people think the government sees people that it was supposed to take care of. And I do think that this has been an issue that has been lingering around for a while. The opposition did not have a concrete proposition to it, but because they did address it in a variety of ways by saying that, we will be looking at the welfare of people and so on and so forth. When you're looking at the opposition, you have to rely on their word. When you're looking at the incumbent, you can see what is happening. And what has happened is that essentially the old pension system is gone. There is a long-running dispute, which is in the Supreme Court, which is on this scheme called EPS 95, which was for a bunch of government service people, where there were limits placed year after year after year. And eventually a bunch of people went to the courts and said these are artificial limits and people should have been given a choice in terms of how much they want to contribute to these schemes. And the government department that is relevant to this scheme has been pushing back very, very strongly that we do not want this to happen, making it as difficult as possible for people to be able to access this. At the margin, so I don't think that it matters for a very dedicated voter of the BJP.
Of course.
But at the margin, I think this is reflective of the type of area where you potentially could have flipped. Thinking that I would like, and therefore people who want to be in that position would like to think that if I'm getting into the government services, I want to be taken care of for the rest of my life. I want my parents to be taken care of. That's just another group of people. And if I don't get the sense that that is what is going to happen in the years to come, I might at least look at an alternative which claims to be saying that it will do it. And also another important point of distinction here is because a lot of times in the Indian context, because we have very simple categories, we put them under that this is a dole or this is a revadi or that this is a welfare scheme. People who are asking for their pension, at least in their view, this is earned benefit.
This is earned benefit.
It is not something that somebody will do them a favor if they get it. They have put in the hard yards, they have made the trade-off of not being in the private sector and so on. So that's another bit of nuance, that this is not this group of people who are sitting and saying give us doles. These are people who are saying I have put in 30, 35, 40 years and then can I get something.
And this is something that's innately attached to government jobs in India. Pension and government jobs go hand in hand. So now with pensions going away from some PSUs as well, and couple that with the privatization push for the entire economy, do you think these things coupled into a double whammy for the government of sorts?
To a limited extent, I think this would have happened with any government which would have been an incumbent in this stage of our development process. Because a lot of our social narratives have not caught up with economic realities. Because a lot of the conversations, and I'm sure you would be quite familiar with these conversations that you would have with elders in your family, would be about the realities that they grew up with. So if the first thing that you buy with your salary is a car, they would look at you funny and say, "Arey, this is not what prudent people used to do 30 years ago."
Exactly.
And a lot of our social narratives, because the family structure is still relatively stable in the Indian context, not as strong as some people would like it to be, but it still remains. A lot of the narrative comes from that generation. But our economic realities have changed completely. So a lot of times expectations do not align with our reality. As you move more towards market forces, you would expect certain things to happen. For instance, you would expect high performers to be rewarded disproportionately. So you would expect people who are doing well to make a lot of money. Now that is something that continues to happen. So you get to hear stories of all of these unicorns coming up and young millionaires. There are now flats in the city that we are currently sitting in that are at prices that always surprise me who is the one buying, but there are people buying. So at least there are some people who are making that amount of money. So we like it. So we like that upside. But there's also the downside, right? If you want all of the good things, you will have to be willing to take some of the bad things. Essentially, this is the risk-taking nature that allows you to participate in the market. The downside is that a lot of protections that you used to have, things like pension, are likely to go away. Now, that we don't like. So this is a trade-off that we in our society haven't yet made. Also because we should remember that a lot of our understanding of what it means to be a richer country comes from the developed world today, which is where a lot of, almost all of these countries have not very stable, but they have functioning pension mechanisms.
And they have also a social structure which somewhere is a little missing in India at this moment.
So there's increasingly this concern. So we had talks about, if you look at the tax rates, there is this increasing concern that we continue to pay so much, we get very little. And then whatever it is that we had earned, now that is also going away. And again, this is one of those conversations that cannot necessarily be pinned on this ruling coalition because it is fiscally prudent to get rid of it, and I think that there is large-scale agreement on it. But you can expect people to be a little upset about it, which means that this is the kind of thing that forces you to look at alternatives.
It's actually also a narrative that probably we are groomed up with, because even with our parents today and when we talk to them and everyone, so in India, even with private sector jobs, asset building is not the main thing we're looking at. We're looking at savings, because there is something on the back of our mind that there is no pension to be had, so you have to save for those days. So I think that is something to do. So so this was our session on one of the economic factors that may have contributed to what the mandate is in 2024, which is BJP finishing somewhere, the NDA finishing below 200 seats, 300 seats, and the India Alliance getting more than 200, 230. So this was our analysis for DNA. You are watching me with Vatsalya Srivastav. Stay tuned for more such interesting talks.